Welcome to Promiscuous Cinema, a podcast for movie sluts. I'm CJ Ariano.
And I'm Adam Callahan.
And this is a podcast where we select a random word and choose a movie to discuss based on that word. But today, we're not going to do that. Adam and I are filmmakers in our own right, and last year we made a short film called The Appraiser, which screened at festivals across the US and internationally. And one of the most rewarding parts of that experience was getting to meet so many other independent filmmakers whose work is incredibly inspiring. So we thought, you know what, we should open up this podcast not only to talk about the films that we talk about, but dialogue with fellow filmmakers about their work and their craft, and chat about what excites us and scares us about indie filmmaking. So today we have with us two filmmakers that we met at the Big Apple Film Festival when both of our films played there last spring. So Adam, why don't you tell us about our guests?
Oh, I'd love to. We're here today with Colin Henning and Chad Hylton, who are life and business partners. And they together have formed CH² Films. Under this label, they've produced and completed 4 shorts and 1 feature. These have screened at the Big Apple Film Festival, the Chain Theater, and Dances with Films New York. Their feature, Appalachian Dog, was acquired for distribution by Buffalo 8 and will be released this year. CH² Films is committed to new and inventive storytelling, regardless of the genre, combining modern sensibilities with traditional elements. CH² offers films with flair. Would you say that, Chad and Colin? You're full of flair?
Oh, yeah.
Flaming, one might say.
Oh, yeah. When I said life partners, I really tried hard not to use that exact word, you know? I really did. But welcome. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So excited to be here.
Yes.
I'm just going to warn you ahead of time that I'm probably going to pronounce your film Appalachian Dog the entire fucking time. And I hope that's okay with you.
I have to confess something. I was looking up how to pronounce it yesterday because I realized that I've been saying it different than he has. Because he's been saying it Appalachian, and I've been saying Appalachian. And I'm like, I feel like I should at least be saying the same thing he's saying. So no worries there.
And that is something I've noticed between like kind of a north-south split is I find that people kind of like above Pennsylvania tend to say Appalachian versus people below tend to say Appalachian. Is there a right way? Yes, it's Appalachian, but we'll go with either.
No, it's actually Appalachian.
Okay.
Colin, I'm so glad. I'm so glad there's like such an obvious split so early in the recording of this podcast because I think that's good fodder for like a battle or a rumble later. Yeah. But it is Appalachian. Not to tell you what your film is called, but.
Did you have to? Is that word ever uttered in the film? And so did you have to like have an agreement just so that it's consistent on screen?
Ooh, I don't think the word is ever said.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now that we have all that covered,
good,
great.
That's the extent of our questions.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Although
coming
answered, it is interesting because
episode.
like we provided primary sources for the accents and stuff, and it's like we're looking at like Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, and you can have like a town that's like 5 miles, 2 towns that are only 5 miles from each other, but they might sound like entirely different just because there's a mountain between them or a river. So like those people have like never really seen each other. So, we try to all be fairly consistent, but there is the element of, Peggy could be, originally from somewhere 5 miles away. If she sounds a little different, it's fine. But there were certain words that we wanted to be the same, like all across the board. And those are things like, the word can't, we always have as can't and stuff like that. So there is a certain level of consistency.
That's amazing. I mean, that's one of the things I love about this film and just the way you create in general is your massive like attention to detail, and like that sense of like dramaturgy that I think can be missing from a lot of independent film. But before we get into Appalachian Dog specifically, I'm just going to commit to that.
God.
I would love to hear about
commit to anything else. Sorry, just commit to anything else.
No, now I'm definitely all in, just because I know that it like pisses you off. So,
oh God,
this is the relationship that we have. I'd love to hear about how you two met and like what is the CH Squared origin story.
Oh my god. Okay, so we met at college, went to Purchase College. I was a film major, he was an acting major. Very Sharks and the Jets. No. And so he was interested in making films, so he reached out to me because he saw one of my short films that I posted on Facebook. So he Facebook messaged me and said, I'm looking to make a short film and like could I like, get coffee and like ask some advice. And so I was like, ooh la la, someone wants to hear what I have to say, and I was like all puffed up. And it was really nice. But little did I know that was just a sneaky way of getting to know me.
I tried to get my claws in any way I could, so.
How much of that was like genuine, or like you really did want to like dialogue about the craft, Colin, and how much of it was like, I think he's cute, I'll use this as a pretext?
It was definitely both. I mean, we were Facebook friends because this was back in the day where you had Facebook friends, I guess, and then where you would just like Facebook friend someone you've never actually met just because, oh, you go to the same college or I've seen you around or whatever. And so we were definitely Facebook friends because he was handsome. But I watched his film because he posted it on Facebook, and I definitely would not have reached out if it was bad. And it was very much like up my alley. It was this sort of like film noir, Hitchcock-inspired thing about this like housewife and her neighbor, I guess we'll say.
Murder mystery.
Yes.
There are so many things I love about this. First, Facebook is the most romantic way to meet back in like 2010. So like, you've got that going for you. And Colin, you said something that just like shattered me. Like, I would not have reached out if it was bad. Like, which just speaks to your the high expectation you have of yourself and the art you put in the world, and of your partner, which even back then you knew. And I don't know, that just strikes me as both romantic and kind of hilarious.
I love that.
Yeah, no comment. So yeah,
no comment. Yeah, I told you we're putting you to the grill today. Okay, we're gonna need the hard hitting answers. Yeah.
So when did you start like creating together and connect the dots between that meeting and all the way up until like Appalachian Dog? Take us on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, unofficially, I helped you with your junior film.
My junior film, he helped me direct some of the actors in a rehearsal that I had because he was so good at talking to the actors in a way that us little, dirty film kids were always so scared to like talk to actors for some reason because we're just like, held up in our editing bays in the dark. And he actually like read my script for my junior film and was like, oh, well, in this scene, like, I think that this is what the point of this scene is for this character. And I was like, oh, really? Cool. I wrote it good, didn't I? And I had never thought about my script in that way. And that was our first time really working together. And that was just a little taste. And then he helped me on my senior film because we were friends for years before we got together officially. And he helped me on my senior film. And then after we graduated, we were doing films together. But then we really thought, well, why don't we just like, make a company together, because we're like, I'm working on my projects, he's helping, I'm helping him on his, and then that came out like about, I don't know, a year ago or something. Yeah.
So you were already together by the time like CH Squared officially came along.
We started dating your senior year, right before your film.
Yeah, it was great.
And I would like to say I volunteered to help with the film before we were dating. I was a good person. And then I kept doing it even after we were dating, so I'm a really good person.
Wait, what did you volunteer to do?
What were we doing?
Oh my God, I can't say.
My little
He was the fluffer, obviously.
The fluffer.
Hylton. No.
It was a student film. I mean, I was like AD/PA, just that kind of
fun.
thing. Yeah. And then, what was the first kind of like project that we worked on?
Libba.
Would have been Libba, I guess.
So that was right after I graduated, and he had 1 year left, and he wanted to make a movie about Elizabeth Cotton, and it was starring Haley, who also is in Haley Hart Franklin, who is also in Appalachian Dog, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. So that's another kind of North Carolina-based piece. So if you don't know who Elizabeth Cotton is, she was a folk singer who was born and raised in North Carolina, which is where I grew up, and actually she's from my hometown. And so it was a piece about her, and Haley played a young Elizabeth Cotton, and so it was another period piece. That film, unfortunately, just because of cost of music rights and finishing it kind of overlapping with the start of COVID, meant it never really got to go anywhere. Because then by the time COVID was over, we'd really kind of like moved on to other projects, and we'd also learned so much more. So then I guess Unideal Husband was the first really like thing we really produced hand in hand.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
2022.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Almost going on 3
Nice.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was done
It's-
right before Appalachian Dog.
It's so cool to hear about how your creative partnership has grown, and to hear y'all talk about the different skills you bring to the relationship. I was really struck when Chad, you were talking about how Colin was working with actors in a way that you had never thought of, and Colin, I'm sure like Chad has brought things about making film or filmmaking that have really expanded your knowledge or like grasp of what you're doing as a director. Talk to us a bit about how Appalachian Dog came about.
Yeah, so that was something that I started writing it, I guess, in early or mid 2022. And that was really because we'd completed a couple shorts, I guess, or I guess it was just Eden we'd filmed by that point. But then, because of COVID, didn't edit it. And we were looking for the next thing. And, I mean, I went to school for acting. I know a lot of really amazing, talented actors. And I wanted to work with them, give them an opportunity to work with them before they would probably, will get snatched up by higher paying things and, greater things that will fill their schedule. So that was something that Chad, Georgia, and I really launched together, because it wouldn't have been possible, making a feature the way that we did if there wasn't a team of people on board, like, from the get-go, really before the script was even written. Because that's something that Georgia always, I don't know, I guess teased me about, or kind of like would always gently push me towards. And I think it was 2022, so we were kind of starting to leave COVID. A lot of people were looking for the next thing to do. And this ended up being what that was.
And so Georgia is one of your very close collaborators, it sounds
Yes. So she's somebody I went to school with, college, and she's also from North Carolina. So it's one of those, the industry, even before you're really even in the industry, is such a small place, because we met at the 3-week-long high school summer program that UNC School of the Arts offers. And that would have been back in 2013. So before I went to college, I knew who she was, and she is the reason. I will give her credit, because even in that 3-week high school, camp, basically, she was just so amazing that when I saw she'd gotten into the BFA at Purchase, I was like, well, then that's the one that, because I'd had a couple I was trying to decide between, that was the one I ended up going with because of her.
Wow. Okay, stalker. No, I'm kidding. So it sounds like, or correct me if I'm wrong, that you amassed a dream cast, you knew actors that you wanted to work with, and then you built the story around them.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of how it was. It's always hard because you never really know if you're going to get who you want. So I definitely had who I wanted in mind, but ultimately I think the script just has to be your guide. At least that's true for me, is it's I can't really write for people, just because then I think that takes you away from story and theme. It's really good to know kind of in the back of your head, these are this actor's strengths or this actor's quality or something. I always knew I wanted Brooke Elizabeth to play Kate, and part of the reason I wanted that is because that role is really so against her type. That she would bring something really interesting and specific and a lot of depth to that role, because it was going to be such a stretch for her. That being said, just knowing that in the back of my head was enough. That didn't really actively inform any of the like scene writing, I guess.
And so set the stage for us. What is the film about?
Right. So it is post-World War II. Takes place in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, which is essentially the middle of nowhere. And it's a husband coming home from the war. He hasn't seen his wife in 5 years. And it's about the reconnection, or shall we say the lack of connection, that exists between them after that time away.
What about these themes of alienation from what you knew, or who you were after this really big thing happened to you, really spoke to you?
I mean, that almost goes back to, again, just like talking with Georgia about making a feature, because that was something I'd years ago asked her, essentially, like, you know, if ever you wanted to be like, you know, if we were going to make a feature, what would you want it to be about? And post-World War II is something always interesting to her, because we do think a lot about like the men coming home from war and how changed they are, but at the same time, these women carried on with their lives while they were away. She has her whole new life that gets interrupted by her husband coming home. And the parallels of those two stories of husband and wife, and the fact that that parallel doesn't necessarily bring people together, it can tear them apart, is something that I think was really fascinating to both of us. I think, you know, that exists still today. And I think in terms of us kind of like as actors approaching those roles, I mean, I think, you know, it's 2025 now, but I mean, being a woman and a professional woman in any industry is still going to be harder than being a man. And I'm not going to speak too much for her, but I'm sure she would say that. And for me, I mean, I guess that's where, you know, being a gay person in the world, you know, kind of like you feel that being on the outside of something, and film especially can be such like a boys club, and obviously I mean like a straight boys club when I say that. So in a weird way, it doesn't always matter how successful you are or what rooms you're in, you can still feel like you're in that room and knocking on the door at the same time. So I'm sure that informs my kind of immediate empathetic connection to that situation.
That's so great to hear, because I think about the two of you, and I've known you a very brief time, but you two obviously have such a different relationship than these characters. So rich that you've started a production company. So it's fascinating to see you as an actor and to see you both as filmmakers explore something entirely different than that, and in an entirely different time period.
I think
100%.
I think what's so nice about the film too is, for me, like working in post on it, and I don't want to jump the gun and talk too ahead in post yet, but I really connect with a lot of those themes, and I feel like it's the idea of like, oh, how do you make this kind of idea of like a period piece can feel so kind of removed from so many people at times, and it's like, well, like the themes are timeless, you know, and very timely. The feeling of being othered, of not quite feeling like you know who you are, and like you know, pushing away what you're actually running toward. I think we can all relate to those feelings, and I feel like when I read the script and throughout the filming of it and then the editing, I mean the layers upon layers that I would feel. It's like I read the script, and then when we were filming it, I was like listening to the performances, and I was like, my gosh, you know, and it just got more and more, you know, in depth as I went along. And I also kind of realized that I read the script and I loved it, and then talking about like the writing and the actors and that whole kind of communication, it's so interesting because like I knew of the underlying subtext and stuff and scenes, but then actually hearing the performances on set, it's like, you know, like let's say the line is like, oh, where's the lamp? It's over there. They would come in with all of this baggage and just be like, where's the lamp? It's over there. And I was like, damn. I was like, I'm upset. And I thought this was just like a little scene. And like, you know, it's just like that. Like, I love the baggage that each character brought. It's very relatable to me.
I'm curious about like the writing process, and how many drafts did it go through? And then when did you, either as the writer, Colin, or you as a team, both of you, decide, okay, this is the draft we're going with, it's ready to shoot, and we're going to do it?
That's a really good question. I mean, film and indie film is so weird because you live with things for so long. Like the film is, going to be released, sooner rather than later, and it has distribution, all that stuff. But God, I started writing this, when I was like 24, and now here I am, like still living with this story, and it's I guess, I wrote the first draft like early 2022, and we were originally looking at filming, I think, that summer, and then just scheduling pushed it back, which I think was just like God's intervention, because the script like really transformed after that. And it's hard, I think, when like you're going to be writing for a small budget, because you don't want to have that hinder you too much. But at the same time, that can be a gift, because it can become about what are the best ways and the most inventive ways I can tell certain scenes. So some scenes started transforming given what I thought would be achievable. And some scenes started transforming just because you live longer with the character. And you start reading it. And I think one of the things I learned the most as a writer was really like, read your script when you don't, like when you're not in the mood to like go and give yourself notes, essentially. Just like read it to read it. Because that's where you'll really figure out what is and what isn't working. And that's where I think some of the best stuff came from, because you start, it's husband and wife, but it's really more the story of Marion and Peggy, and then Kate is such a foil to all of these people. So everybody has their own trajectory, and you'll start figuring out, oh, I should plant this seed here, or I should add in this thing, or I can take away this because this other scene already accomplishes that. And then you layer on top of that, obviously, the culture was something that I was really able to delve into, given the amount of time that I ended up having once we'd figured out we were going to film in December and January. So
I wonder if it might be a good idea to do a quick little breakdown of the four characters, because I don't know if we've actually said like who Peggy is in this. So just because we know, but so there's Teddy, who's coming home from war. Marion is his wife. Peggy is the seamstress that has been working for Marion as he's been away. And Peggy and Marion have formed this very close bond, and that's what causes so much tension for when he comes back home. And Kate is their friend, who comes over a lot and kind of gets in everyone's business, and it's kind of like the big sister to Marion. So we have these four characters that are all having their own kind of baggage and also these tension between all of them. So the film really lives in this really place of tension, but also this kind of humorous thread throughout, because tension can also be funny.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really love about the film, because I rewatched certain scenes last night, and one of the really strong like bits of magic that really works about this film is that I can imagine their past life that they're yearning for. Like I almost feel like I see it in my mind, like we're watching something from like season 6 of their lives, and I can clearly picture season 1, right? Like all that to say, there's like a very rich sense of history and backstory amongst like this group of people. How much did that come about in rehearsal? What was the rehearsal process like? How much did you discuss backstory, and how much of it was just like intuited on set?
I think it helps that a lot of these people like are, we all knew each other. I mean, to varying degrees, I guess, but we all knew each other, so there's going to be chemistry there. There was discussion in like broader senses among people, and I mean, I can't speak for like Haley and Georgia and what they'd come up with for their relationship in the 5 years that Teddy was away. I know for me and Georgia, we talked a lot of broad strokes, and I think that was really helpful, because 5 years is a long time, especially when you're young. And especially when that 5 years is going to be filled with a lot of stuff. So we talked about the broad strokes. We talked about like how we'd probably met. But we didn't really talk specifics, and that helped me because I think we probably each came up with our own individual specifics that probably what Marion would remember and think about from her past life would be different than what Teddy would think about. And that would probably lead to some inadvertent disconnection. And I think that, well, I know that Brooke and Georgia talked a lot about their relationship and that kind of sisterly bond that exists between them, which is so wonderful because there is a lot of competitiveness with that sort of like pseudo-sibling relationship. And we're seeing, that's one of my favorite relationships in the movie just because we're really seeing it come to a head. Because Kate's older, so, she's always been able, when they were growing up, to be more of like a guiding light for Marion. But, now Marion, she's a seamstress. She gets to wear the glamorous clothes because she gets to make them, herself. And Kate's wearing like her grandmother's hand-me-downs because she's a farmer's wife. And, fashion is not her forte. And we're really seeing how those kind of external things are representing internal things that are beginning to bubble up when the film begins.
Colin, I just love hearing you talk about these characters. I know you think so deeply about acting and what it is to be an actor and how you do it truthfully. I really want to hear about how you do that when you're also wearing the director hat. When you're directing not only yourself but other actors, and really also from you, Chad, like what was that process like on the outside? And what sort of was there any teamwork happening between the two of you? That was like a 4-layer question, but just run with it. Let me know what you think.
Well, it was a skeleton crew, so it was just 6 people. It was me, Colin, Aiden, who lit and was a cinematographer, and then our 3 other actors, because we were in this cabin and we Airbnb'd it. And there was a 6-person limit, so that's what we had for all those cabin scenes. And so I was doing sound on the film. So I was also listen, I had 2 systems of sound hooked up to me, and it wasn't the summer, but it might as well have been because I was just sweating. And I think probably because I was like hooked up to a lot of gear, and I was like, I gotta get this to sound great. But what's funny is when I wasn't in my own world of sound on set, there's just like the first scene. I feel like, the second scene, but the first scene in the cabin for Colin, and it was like the first one really with you and Georgia like talking to each other. It was a lot of tension in that scene. It was I don't know if it's a spoiler. Well, I'll just say it's the one where she says. Oh, that would be a spoiler, actually. They're fighting about the prices.
Yeah, we'll say it's the morning after that night that he comes home.
Good tease.
They're fighting about the prices and how the prices are different. Yes, and there was just like tension in their relationship, and then I remember I just offered one thing. I was just like, try not to like ever. Oh, this is funny. I said try not to ever exhale. Obviously you have to breathe, but try not to sigh. Try not to do any of that and try to like really hold that tension and just like, look at each other or really like just when you're looking away, just like that's because you absolutely have to. So just like holding that tension. That's the only thing that I said because that was just like your first scene with her and you guys found that rhythm, and then I didn't say anything the rest of the movie. I was just having him do his thing because I feel like you really found your own rhythm like within that first scene, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the first scene's always hard because I mean I guess that was my first. Oh God, that wasn't really it was my first scene in North Carolina. And that was my first scene speaking with Georgia, not my first scene with Georgia. And yeah, it's gonna be difficult because the stakes of that scene are so high. And that was our first day in the cabin. So the idea of, as a director then kind of like setting the tone for a certain level of how we're moving forward, I guess, professionalism for just like a general term or whatever. But then also having to just like let that go and like be in the scene was something that was very difficult for me in that first bit. And I think that's part of what that scene is, because it is this like really tense, two people trying to get their point across to each other, and it just feels very like square peg round hole. And for that kind of thing to work, you have to be really just engaged with your scene partner, and that's where you saying, you know, don't exhale and always like hold a gaze and everything is so useful, because that's something that I'd always learned in acting school, because it's like exhaling is like a release of tension, it's a release of energy. And it's a more physical scene. She's like doing laundry and stuff, so it's like, you know, you go to school, you learn these things, but then it's like, oh, your first day on set and on location, and I have laundry to do, so I can kind of do this thing, or I'm in the back like flipping through this book. It's really easy to like huff and puff while you're doing these things, but just redirecting all of that energy into each other was so important. And I mean, generally for me, I think the more I could just like forget that I was the director in those scenes, the easier it would be. And I would have certain days where I wouldn't work like the entire first half of the day. And then I would work the second half, and then vice versa. The next day I might work the first half and not the second half. So I'm not having to do everything all the time. And that can really help me get into a groove then of like, okay, I'm directing, like people are like listening to me, and et cetera, et cetera. You're figuring out that shorthand language with people, especially like with Aiden, our cinematographer, the way that we worked together. By the second day, it felt like we'd been doing it for like 2 weeks, which was,
that's lovely.
Yeah, really important.
And in terms of like keeping your eye on like the look and feel, or like the composition, did you just place like a lot of trust in Aiden and make sure that he had his eye on that? Because if it were me, I'm definitely not an actor. And if I were acting in a scene that I was also directing, I think that I would be asking for playback every 5 seconds. Like, did that look good? Like, let's look at it on the monitor and make sure that we got it. Like, did you ask for playback a lot, or did you just, when you were acting, you were acting?
You know, I would ask for playback sometimes, usually if it was a more like technically oriented moment, but you know, I think I would usually do that for like just the rehearsal or the first take to really see kind of like how things were landing, because it is a movie with a lot of blocking. Other than that, I mean, I wrote the script with these actors in mind, but I did also write it with him in mind to shoot it. And we didn't shot list together, but I had provided him with like references to, you know, certain movies, but also references to Appalachia itself. So he really knew the world, and it's already a film that's so close to his taste. So a lot of the way things would work would be, oh God, this actually kind of goes back to, I will say, I don't recommend this. For a lot of the scenes, I didn't necessarily have a formal shot list. This is because we were originally supposed to be in this other cabin that fell through like a week before, and there's a lot of other stuff that then had to kind of like be on this to-do list. So the shot list that I'd had for a lot of these more like heavy scenes were for a completely different floor plan and weren't relevant anymore. So that was a really fun exercise then in like, okay, well, what was the feeling that I was trying to capture? What's the point, and how can that exist here? Because it's not going to exist one for one. So figuring that out and figuring this new floor plan out, a lot of what I would do is, especially for those like kind of smaller scenes that are about, you know, probably a third into the film or something, I would have, you know, option A, option B, talk through it with Aiden, and then he would say option B. And then I would usually just say, great. And then it's like, you go from there, because I always want people to feel like the job that they're doing on set is their own and isn't mine, especially because it is indie movie. Like, I am also doing the costumes. I was also the writer, you know, but it's like, I'm not a cinematographer. And it's like, yeah, there might be certain scenes that are like, oh, I want this. But I don't know. I'm still pretty malleable, because as long as I feel like the point of the scene is coming across, and that if somebody suggests something different and it's going to make ultimately, story beat what I want stronger, then it doesn't like need to look the exact way that I imagined it in my head, because sometimes that can be your worst enemy.
It's the whole idea of don't fall in love with a specific way you think something has to be, and more of like what it means. So when you fall in love with what something means, then you're more open to other ideas as long as it's telling the same story.
Yep.
Well, and it sounds like you have a lot of trust with the people you were working with, not only your actors, but your cinematographer, and that the way you approached the production of the film really relied on that trust. I'm thinking about me as an actor. There's no way I could direct myself because I have no concept of myself like in front of a camera, and I rely on the director's outside perspective so much. It's just so wonderful to hear about how much you, as the multi-hyphenate in the room, like really trusted the people and intentionally put the people in their positions that you knew you could rely on their skills, you knew you could rely on their opinions, and moved through the process in that way. It takes a lot of, to quote Wicked, braverism, I think, to do that, and not everyone can do that.
Thank you. I mean,
how long did the shoot take? And a possibly related question, I love extended takes in general, and I love the way that you do them in this film. How much of that was like practicality, and how much of that was just like creative taste?
So it's like it was a 10-day shoot, and that's including the stuff that we shot in New York.
Yeah.
Right. So we only had about a week in the cabin in North Carolina. So we were shooting how many pages a day? Do you say?
Oh, I have no idea, actually.
8
Probably
to 10?
7 to 10.
Wow.
Something like that. And what's fun is the film really does, it's like a combination, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a combination of 1940s, like Hollywood cinema, and then also like 1970s grittiness, and just like how dark things can get and how gray. And also we had, so anyway, he pivoted. The kind of idea of heavy blocking and master shots was very much ingrained in this kind of 1940s cinema. So I would say it was both. I would say it was like, well, that's the way it's going to happen. And also that helps us kind of go for this kind of Southern Gothic, kind of romantic kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And also when you're in a two shot of someone, like, of two people, and they're, really working off each other, and there's this blocking and there's this stuff, there's just this innate tension that happens when you're watching two people in a shot together. So I think that also really helped build the tension. And for me, as an editor, it was very interesting to work with a lot of masters, because that was something that it's almost like my job really was to not manufacture as much, right? Because like you're always manufacturing as an editor, but it wasn't to really like manufacture a scene, because I don't have a bunch of takes and a bunch of coverage. It was just to heighten what was already there, and the performances were doing it for me. So it was just my job to kind of aid in what was already happening, and my big hand came in the transitions in between scenes. I felt setting up the next scene was my kind of job. So that was, the 10-day shoot. And there's another part of the question I don't remember.
Just the long.
Well, Chad, how long did you spend with the film after production? How long were you editing? What were you thinking as you were editing? Walk us through your process.
So first, what was so great was we had these long takes, and we got to have a sense of instant gratification after the shoot because some of these scenes are one take, and we're like, let's just start with one that we kind of know which take we're going to do. We'd watch through them all still, though, because we want to, be good and watch through all of them. And we picked our favorite take. We're like, oh my God, we have a scene done. Oh my God, guys, we did it. The movie's almost done. So we had that kind of sense of gratification immediately, and that really helped get the ball rolling, because this was, this is our baby, and it's the idea of just like starting this task of, okay, well, great, we shot it. Whew. Okay, well, now we have to put the whole thing together. I think having those kind of master scenes was really like exciting for us in the get-go. And then from then on, we just kept getting dirtier and dirtier, getting our hands dirty. And then I would say we had our first assembly done 2 weeks.
Probably
2 weeks. Because I just, I'm a little editing maniac, and I just can't stop, and I don't love sleeping that much when I'm editing, because I just want to do it all the time.
Sure.
So we had that in 2 weeks, and then we finessed it for the next month, I would say. And then it was pretty much, I don't know, the whole post-process combined, just taking out the gaps of sitting with it and not maybe when you'd step away from it. I would say 2 months to 3 months total.
Maybe 3 months, because
maybe 3 months.
Sound and color is
Sound
a
and
whole
color
other
is a whole
piece.
thing.
I think
Yeah.
we probably almost spent
3
just as
months.
long on sound and color as we
true.
did on the actual picture edit.
I would say 3 to
Well,
4. Yeah.
What made those things so challenging?
Well, because, I would say that for me, it was training my eyes and my ear in a way that I never really stretched them before. Because I always do sound and color for our shorts. But a feature, it's just I have to make sure that this can be seen in any capacity. And sustain that quality throughout. So it's just I hadn't at this level done something for this long in terms of doing the sound and the color, and that was something that because this is an indie film, it's sound and color is gonna be us. It's gonna be us looking at the monitor and airplaying it to the TV and seeing it on a few different monitors and just seeing what looks good. And then the sound was really fun because we got to do a lot of ADR, and there's so much I don't know, that was something that Colin really it was so fun. It kind of felt like being a kid again when you first fall in love with movies. This train sound is actually going to be us with a Tonka truck or whatever.
So fun, all the Foley and stuff.
He did a lot of Foley. He did there's leaves in the thing, but what he did was he took tissue paper and was doing a little ASMR stuff, and then just marbles in the hand is footsteps on gravel, and
That's exactly what your hand looks like right now. Is marbles in your hand too. Yeah, it looks great.
And that was just fun. It was a discovery. It was a learning experience. It was a discovery. So that took a while.
You know what's interesting is I love the music, or what my mind called music, but I'm on your IMDb page. I don't see a composer listed, so I think that in your minds it fell under sound design, that really atmospheric, kind of whistling. How did that come about?
First of all, the whistling is me.
Famous.
Okay, Andrew Bird.
Don't make me cry. My God. Let me grab my shawl.
Yeah, whistle notes. Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, the music, right? The quote unquote music and the sound was all just wrapped up in one. That was something that Colin early on was I don't want to have music. We do have a few songs, but they're in the world,
Yes,
or they could be.
It starts that way, and it's a good because it's hard to go through a whole movie and not really have music. So I really wanted the sounds of the world to be the music at the beginning, and it's in the script, kind of when we'll hear Peggy hum, because she's especially throughout the movie, but especially in the beginning, kind of that's something that'll take us in and out of certain scenes. Then halfway through, when we finally get to see Claudette, who is played by the amazing Monica Ray Summers Gonzalez, she's amazing. That is our kind of introduction to actual music, because we've heard about this character for since the first scene at the dinner table. They're working on her wedding dress throughout this movie, and then it really is about exactly halfway is when we finally see this woman, and we're in her house, and we see it's a nicer house. And so you're hearing this phonograph in the background.
It's also a nice palate cleanser after the previous scene. It's we're balancing the heavy and the ominous with the levity and having some music. It opens up the world. We're going to a different part of town.
It's a good like reset, and
It's a
it's
good
kind
reset.
of telling you we're moving to the next section of this movie. You're like hearing this music now, and it's telling you something about who Claudette is, and it's telling you something about where the film's going to go from there. So that is the closest we get to real music, is that like phonograph in the background that we then kind of have play under certain scenes and bring it in as a little bit of music, because Claudette does represent a certain thing. You know, she's having her wedding dress worked on the whole time. So when we cut to the next scene with Marion and Peggy with the wedding dress in Marion's house, there's a little bit of that phonograph that you're hearing again, but it's the song that you've heard Peggy hum before. So suddenly we're like playing with the rules.
And I want to ask just one more question about post before we move on, which one of my favorite scenes, not a spoiler, I'll try to ask it in the least spoilery way, but it's a love scene. And I love these shots of like the trees going in and out of focus. And to me, that really feels like a collaboration with everybody, all the cast and crew that's involved, but specifically with the cinematographer and possibly the editor and director. Like, how did that come about? Did you find that in post, or how much of that was discovered on set?
I guess it was really a combination of everybody. Like, that was a scene where I really had a clear idea of how I wanted it to feel, because especially that's one of my favorite kind of points in the movie in terms of, I guess, the collaboration of everybody again, because after that scene is when we go into that dining room drink scene, which plays as like one shot for probably like 3 minutes. And so it's coming after that river scene with so many quick cuts. I mean, that's definitely the fastest paced scene in the movie. And I knew I wanted that contrast. How exactly to achieve that is something that was going to be up to everybody involved. So we didn't know exactly how that love scene was going to be blocked until we got to the river, because, and it was buy the DVD to see, you know, Georgia and I talk about that. But the river has a big hill slope on it, so we had to kind of re-navigate how to block that. So it was the same basic thing, but it was technically a lot more challenging than we thought. All that being said, it's all a collaboration. So then that changes a little bit of how Aiden's going to shoot it, but it also gave us a lot of really wonderful opportunities, because we are kind of like nestled in this little crook of the riverbank now. And Aiden was able to find such wonderful ways to create intimacy in this, you know, lush, open landscape. And then honing in on that intimacy with those quick cuts, with those like trees going in and out of focus. That was something that him and I had talked about. And then he got those shots on his own, because I had to like go off and start prepping the next scene we were going to film. And so he just stayed behind and started getting those close-ups of the water, close-ups in the tree branches. And then how that was put together was all Chad.
Yeah. No, it was
All take the credit, Chad. Take the credit.
I agree.
I dropped this and put on a.
Oh.
No, it was lovely to edit. Also, I just love. That was where I had so much fun playing with sound too, because like when it's muffled, when it's like opens up, when we're like in her POV. At this point, I'm just like saying what the scene is. I don't know how much of it is a spoiler. Probably not, right?
I think this is more of a tease than a spoiler.
Yeah,
we're teasing the audience.
Yeah. Or maybe the scene doesn't exist. No.
It's just make-em-ups.
Yeah, you're just making this up. I love it.
But like, you know, when the ear opens up, when we're with her in her POV of what she's hearing, versus when it's more of like an emotional POV versus, you know, that was some of my favorite stuff to work on.
So how have the audience reactions been? What has like screening it been like for you? Talk about that experience.
Wow, you know what's really cool is when we were screening it at the festival recently, at Big Apple Film Festival. It was so cool because I love going to the movie theater, but I have found in recent times going to the theater that just people just talk throughout movies. People like do weird stuff. People, it's like they think that the movie on the screen is Netflix at home, because they'll be doing the running commentary a little bit.
Can I tell you, I saw Baby Girl last week, and the person took their shoes off next to me. Like, their shoes were off. They crossed their foot at one point, and it almost touched my knee.
Instant dismissal.
No, and it was definitely a Gen Zer. They were taught.
They don't know it's COVID's fault, I think. Like, just especially with young people, they haven't been in social settings like that.
Yeah, this is a recliner, but this is not your living room, honey child.
I know, and I won't say too much about this, but when we saw Scream, the new one, someone was escorted out by security because they just did not know how to behave, and they threw their popcorn into the audience.
No, they thought it was Scream 2. They thought they were in the opening of Scream 2.
Oh, yeah, baby, you're not Jada Pinkett. That's not your name. No.
So, to my lovely surprise, when in screening Appalachian Dog at Big Apple Film Festival, complete silence the entire time. I didn't even hear I didn't hear any breaths. I didn't hear any rustling. Because I was wondering, like, I was preparing myself. I was like, well, people watch movies in different ways, and I was also preparing myself for you always want to prepare for, like, kind of worst case scenario. Like, someone gets up to go to the bathroom during an important part. It's not my business. I'm just here to watch. Or worst case scenario, someone leaves, and it's because, I don't know, they had to do something and they just came for the first half because it's a festival and they don't really care. What was really awesome was it was just complete. You could hear a pin drop the entire time. And all I could hear was my own breath. And I thought that was amazing because with a movie like this that is such a slow burn, it really forces you to just watch these people. And I really felt like in that theater, we had them. Because it's like I could just feel everyone just watching the screen. And I thought that was really exciting. And it's interesting. It's not like because that was my first time seeing it on the big screen, but it didn't feel like I was seeing it for the first time, because I have seen it probably about 100,000 times, but it felt like this is always how I imagined it would be. I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Like, this is what we've been doing. I was like, this is it. The sound and the visual. It was just really a really wonderful experience.
Well, at the same time, I don't want to deny you your experience. I was at that screening, and yes, we were held wrapped, but also folks laughed at what I thought were intentional points of humor, like this weird offbeat humor that creeps into, like, the tension between these characters. Specifically, I think, like, Brooke is, like, a huge standout just in terms of, like, that like dry comedy. And can you talk me through? First of all, I hope the comedy was intentional.
Yes, very much.
Because
oh my god, could you imagine? Like, could you imagine they just leave? They're like, "Fuck you! Like, this is not a comedy." Wow.
But talk to us about, like, those, like, weird strands of humor that, like, creep into this film.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I just love having grown up in the South. I love Southern culture because it's just like humor is so ingrained in who the people are, and that's something that, like, from the get-go in the movie that Kate really represents, is that kind of busybody, talkative, neighbor, kind of like that sort of, like, archetype is very much how she's, like, being introduced. And she thinks that she's the funniest person in the room, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, is what she's saying really that funny, or is what's funny the fact that, like, you can tell she thinks it's funny? And then throughout the movie, I mean, there's things like that. There's, I always joke that, like, just in the script, it's like every other thing that comes out of Teddy's mouth is like a riddle, because he's just very much that Southerner who just, like, talks in, like, allegory. But those
and a man who's used to, like, throwing up distractions.
Yes,
too.
very much.
Like,
who doesn't have the vocabulary, like, the straightforward vocabulary to talk about, like, how he feels or what he's thinking. So it's always akin to something. But those are two people that have a lot of humor in them, and who I think also represent a lot of the kind of, like, I guess, dramatic irony, to speak from a literary perspective, that's present throughout the movie. And then, humor from like as a writer's point, from a writer's perspective, humor is such a good way to keep people engaged, and to like relieve tension and build tension, because when something is funny to the audience but not the characters, that's something that can really like make you lean in and really up the stakes. Because when is it going to be funny to the characters, or will it not be, and is it just going to get worse from here? But yeah, I mean, broad stroke is that it's just, knowing Southern culture that well is going to bring the humor in there. And I guess it's just, as a writer, really finding those moments of when it's going to be most utilized and best utilized.
So what's next for Appalachian Dog?
Well, we're hoping to get like one more theater screening in there. And then it's...
TBA on that, TBD.
Yep.
Do we have some irons in the fire?
Yeah, we can say that.
Yeah, there's some irons in the fire.
Okay, she's being coy. They're being coy.
Yeah, they are.
Who knows,
Being sexy.
more often than not, things don't work out than they do work out, right? So, that being said, though, even if, whatever this, blah, 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 falls through, like, we'll make sure to have sort of like a launch before it goes on to VOD and streaming and everything.
Great.
So, yeah, like, follow our Instagram if you want to see, like, the cool things I'm going to wear for those events.
Can I just say 1 second? I did vote in a Colin fashion show today.
Oh, me as well.
That was
I
like
exercised
every
my right to
quarter.
vote.
Yeah, I know. I felt very seen and very heard. And we haven't really talked about the costumes in this film, which I know, Colin, you mentioned very briefly. You were the costumer.
Yes.
And there's a gal behind you too, showing off some of her wares for any of our viewer who's watching online. But yes, Colin, quite the clothes horse you are.
Yes.
I can't wait to see you at this TBA screening and what you'll wear. Maybe some peacock feather. Can I put that in your ear?
I will say, when I was going through my outfits of last year, I was shocked that I didn't wear a beret in any of them. So we'll see if like maybe that comes up. I don't know. We'll see.
I love that you chose the word. You chose the word "shocked" to describe that. I am shocked that this year went by without a beret.
So if viewers do want to see Appalachian Dog, I'm
Jesus
pivoting
Christ.
back. I'm pivoting
CJ.
back. I'm committing. Is there like a set VOD date for home screening, or like does that depend on all these other variables that you're talking about?
So Appalachian Dog will be dropped VOD March 21st, which is a Friday. So Friday night movie night.
exciting.
I love it.
Perfect movie
Love it.
for kissing. Great date night.
Get yourself
Yeah.
the moonshine, Play a
Yes,
drinking game.
your best like half sleeve dress with a lace collar. I think that's what you would really want to show up in.
Anything butter churny.
Yes.
Ooh, yeah. If you've got a butter churn, break it out. Or if you make a good homemade ice cream in a bucket, you know what I'm saying?
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
That might be good. That might
And
be
watch
good.
it on like an old-timey projector or a Nickelodeon, if you will.
Oh yeah, go to your local Nickelodeon, pay your nickel, get ready for a time.
Okay, great. Adam,
Well-
I still don't know how we wrap these episodes up. We've done so many of them, but
Yeah, I don't. We always get to this point and we're like, "Ugh," we bumble through the
we don't
end.
know.
But Chad and Colin, aka CH Squared Films, it has been such a joy to talk to you. I am so excited to know you and so excited to see what is coming in 2025. And congratulations again on all the success with Appalachian Dog. It's really exciting to see.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us on your show. It's wonderful.
This is our first podcast talking about the movie, so I'm so glad it was with you guys.
Oh, you're our first podcast interview, so we're all virgins today, but no more. No more.
no, the cherry has been popped.
Yes, and thank God. Thank God.
Oh, wait, you already said where viewers can or listeners can find you, right?
Yes.
At CH Squared Films.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to plug, or Chad, Colin?
chsquaredfilms.com.
Do you want to give your socials anywhere else?
Oh yeah, so that's CH Squared Films is the Instagram, and then there's our website chsquaredfilms.com, and then there's my personal Instagram, which is Chad Hazen Hylton, and that's spelled with a Y because I'm not rich.
Yet.
And then also Appalachian Dog is on Letterboxd, so once you watch it, then, leave us a review.
Ooh, I've got to
stars,
post
baby.
that I watched it. Yeah. Ooh, that's a good reminder.
Perf.
Love it.
Perf. Well, CJ, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me on Instagram and Threads at CJLGVA and basically nowhere else for mental health reasons. Where can viewers/listeners find you, Adam?
You can find me on Instagram at Callahadam. That's CALLAHADAM. And you can find our podcast at P Cinema Pod.
Love
CJ,
that for us.
As always, what a gay old time we've had.
It has been an absolute pleasure, an absolute X-rated pleasure.
Were we X-rated today, CH squared? Oh my
Yeah,
god!
none of us have pants on.
I know.
That's true. This is going right up on OnlyFans. So get ready.
All right, say bye, everybody.
Bye everybody.
Bye bye.